Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Stuck in the Middle Empowering Your Middle Managers. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to get logged into the Zoom and then we'll get started with today's webinar. We welcome you as you all log in and look forward to sharing some great information with you today.
Good morning. We're really happy to see you. Well, I guess we can't see you, right, Ro? But we're happy that you're here. So please feel free as we go through today to ask any questions that you'd like as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that once y'all get in here.
Sounds good. We can see the numbers increasing, which makes us very happy.
Yay.
So we'll give it another couple of seconds to allow everyone to log in.
Mary Elbelin and then Anna.
Oh, wonderful. I like that the chat is already going. This
I know. Look
is
at
great.
that.
Happy Friday Eve, everyone.
I know. They're ready to go.
Right? I think we should get started. Oh, we have a good amount of people who have signed in, and we want to be respectful of your time. So, good morning again. Welcome to Stuck in the Middle, Empowering Your Middle Managers. Brought to you by Exude Human Capital. And for those of you who do not know, Exude Human Capital is not your typical consulting firm. Since our founding back in 2006, we've been on the mission to transform organizations by connecting the dots between human resources, leadership development, and inclusion and belonging. And I am so excited today to get to spend time with one of my favorite people at the firm. And I'm going to turn the floor over so that we can do introductions this morning. And Doug, I'll open the floor up for you.
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Ro. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about this topic. It's a really important topic that I've spent a lot of my career helping organizations with how to better work with their middle managers. So just to kind of tell you a little bit about me, I have been in the HR field for quite a few years. It's 30 plus years. I'm not going to give you any more information about that, but I've worked in many different industries. So started my career in banking, and then I worked several years in gaming. So I worked for MGM Resorts in Las Vegas for about 15 years. And I love to tell people that I worked in a pyramid and in a castle. So I've had the opportunity to work in lots of fun places. Been consulting for about 10 plus years, working with Exude for 3 years. And I've run the gamut in all different kinds of organizations, from higher ed to retail, to cannabis, to I've worked with a lot of different industries. So I'm excited to be here and talk about this important topic. So I'm going to pass it back to Ro.
So I am Romaine Jones Wise, pronoun she, her. You're welcome to call me Ro. You can even refer to me as Lettuce in the chat if you like. I'm totally open to that. I've been in human resources now. It'll be 23 years this year. I can't believe I just said that. I'm sorry. Having a real moment. Apologies. And I've worked also at the forefront of higher education, hospitality, gaming, healthcare, home care, manufacturing. And I tell people my tagline is I have a mind for business and heart for people. So I thrive in the area of building relationships, strategic advisory, and I've been with Exude Human Capital. It'll be 3 years this April. So I am very excited to walk through this content with you all, and we look forward to your interaction. So please feel free to type questions or comments in the chat. We will be monitoring them in real time. And then there's also the question and answer function that we will review prior to the end of the call. So both options are available. If you have questions or thoughts or comments that you want to share, please use both, as we will be monitoring during the entire course of this session. All right, Doug, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. How about that? That's always a good place to start. So there's four things that we really want to focus on when we're discussing what middle managers need, and we're going to look at a picture in a couple minutes to talk about exactly why we think this is an important topic. So the first thing we're going to look at, and this really ties into what Ro talked about with people, and that's to be uplifting people managers. We find that it's there's a lot of strategies that we need to use to keep people engaged and motivated, especially in this new era that we live in, where we have people who are we don't see every day. We may talk to them on a computer screen. We may see them in the office, but really look at how can we create uplifting people managers. The second piece is to look at job design and how do you structure roles so what the people are doing is really effective and they understand exactly why they're doing what they're doing. We're going to spend some time looking at expectations. If you ever come to any of our courses or you talk to me in training, I talk about expectations all of the time. I think this is often where middle managers may have an issue, where they don't give expectations to the folks that work for them, and they may not be receiving exact expectations from the executives as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to look at what does it mean to be a manager, and what are the competencies that you need to have in your management team, as well as the people who work for them. So that's what we're going to spend time looking at today. And so let's jump to the next screen, Ro, and let's talk about it. So you've probably heard about the sandwich technique in your career somewhere. We're going to take that and we're going to change it up a little bit for you. So typically what happens with the sandwich technique is that it's used in giving feedback. So you start with something positive, then give them the constructive feedback, and then end with something positive. But I want to look at it in a different way. So when you put together a sandwich, there's the stuff in the middle, and then there's the two pieces of bread. So the top piece is the expectations that come down to the middle manager from on high, I guess, is the best way to talk about it. And that's where, what do we want to accomplish as a company? What do we need you to do as a manager? And how do we want you to do it? And so then the bottom piece is where what's coming up from the direct reports, which is why are we doing this? Why do we have to do it this way? I'm not really sure what you're asking me to do. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle. So if you look at this overstuffed sandwich that we have there, there's a whole bunch of items in the middle that the manager at the middle manager has to work with. So he's getting pushed from above, and she is getting pushed from below. So let's take a look at that a little bit more. So you have anything to add to that, Ro?
So with the sandwich analogy, and I think you described it perfectly, in the duality of the reporting structures, it's very important that in addition to having expectations from upper management and expectations from direct report, our middle managers are still responsible for their primary job functions as well. And sometimes when we look at the filling in the sandwich, we forget that it's more than just people management and monitoring expectations from upper management, but there are specific job requirements and responsibilities that that person is also responsible for, in addition to the meat, the lettuce, the tomatoes. It's kind of like the mayo of it all. So it holds everything together. But I really think that it's important that we understand some of the strategies for engagement and motivation to kind of help middle managers be successful. This is kind of four high levels that we want to offer for thinking about strategies for engagement and motivation. Providing autonomy and ownership, really letting managers understand how they are contributing to the success of the organization, giving them the ownership to do so, and then allowing them the autonomy to do it in the way that works best for them. The other one that for me resonates really loudly is recognizing and appreciation. So making sure that, managers feel that the appreciation in both directions, that their team members offering feedback, upper management is giving feedback. And this is also recognizing and appreciating not only outcomes, but also effort, which sometimes is overlooked.
And
Doug,
then
what?
go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Go. Sorry, Rob. And
No,
then
no, go ahead.
also encourage continuous learning. I think if we look at us as beings or as leaders, it's always important to continually learn new things and new ways of doing things. And how can I be, especially for those middle managers, really giving them the skills that they need to do to work with people, as well as to understand the processes that need to be done. And then my most favorite thing in the world is explaining the why.
Mhm.
And I'm going to tell you why. Did you like that? Was that
That
good?
was good. That was
Okay, all
good.
right. And I'm going to tell you why. So Simon Sinek, I don't know if you know the book, it's Start With Why, but it's a really great book. And he talks about how people don't understand why they're doing things. And so you'll look at a lot of times when say, let's say we're the executives and we decide that we want to do a new process or we want to have some sort of training. I talk a lot about this when I do customer service training. So I'm going to give you that example. Um, so typically what will happen is the executive team decides, hey, we're going to do customer service training. We want to improve our customer service skills. So they tell the middle managers, say, we're going to send everybody to customer service training. And then the middle managers, and this has happened to me in several organizations throughout the years, will go down and say to the line employees, hey, you have to go to this training because the executives say so. So that's probably not the best way to do that. So we're really going to look at, as we look further today, is how do we make it so those managers in the middle understand the why and then can explain the why. So we're doing this customer service training because we want to improve our customer service skills, our customer service scores, and then that in turn creates income for the company. So it's really about how do you explain that and how do you set people up to be successful. I've had organizations before they come and they say, well, the president said we have to do it this way. It's like, okay. So what's happening then is that the middle managers are giving away their leadership. So it's really making sure to get the buy-in before and give them the language before they actually communicate to the frontline employees.
Very important. Explaining the why and making sure it's consistently communicated is also key.
Right.
Definitely. So let's talk about this concept of job design. Let's kind of unpack that. So the guiding principles for effective job designs is making sure that there's task variety, people are really leveraging and utilizing their skill sets, and that there's also a clear path for career progression. So where can I go from this role? Um, Doug, do you want to talk about how to kind of assess and redesign roles for
Well,
better?
so yeah, great. So when we look at roles, we need to involve the employees in the process. I think a lot of times what we'll say is let's take a look at how this, these leadership roles or frontline employee roles. And so involve them in the process. You want to take a look at it, do a job audit. And so that's really working with the job description to say, are these all the skills that this person really needs to do? Are these the things that are important for this job to be successful? And then also understand how many people do you need to do this? Because what we find a lot with organizations is that you may have certain positions that are overwhelmed more than others. And how can we make sure that there's the capacity and they have a balanced workload throughout that middle management level? Create opportunities for feedback, whether it be feedback up or feedback down. So it's really about how do we allow these folks to help to define their job and what's important to the organization based on why we exist as an organization. And then of course, we all have learned that in this day and age, we need to be agile and adaptable, and we need to change. And so I talk to a lot of clients and I talk to a lot of folks about how can we have these specific things that we need to do in the job, but how can we pivot if we need to? Because there are times when we need to pivot and do something different. So like for instance, in the pandemic, right? Everybody says there's the before pandemic world and there's the after pandemic world. And I think we really realized on job design during the pandemic that there's ways to do things that are different than what we've traditionally done. So it's really looking at that and working with the employees and the middle managers to design the right type of jobs.
And if I can offer one additional piece of context here, when working with clients, I always encourage leaders when we're doing job design to look specifically at the role and not how the previous incumbent perform the role. So sometimes we are creating jobs based on how someone else has functioned in this space or what we feel like the ideal situation is, but it's really being specific to the skills that are necessary for the role, identifying where there are gaps so that upskilling can happen, and we're setting up people for success. That is the goal. Moving into a middle management role sometimes can be overwhelming, especially with the dynamic of going from a colleague to a supervisor for some individuals. But when we take into consideration all of these best practices, ensuring that capacity and that balance is going to be key for making sure that there's time to do the work and to manage the relationships in both directions. So I'm a fan of expectation setting, just kind of knowing what is required, and that is both professionally, that is personally, that is in all dynamics of relationships, family, friends, and acquaintances. And I am very much an advocate for making sure when I engage with any of my clients and we're dealing with primarily some performance challenges, the first question I asked were expectations set? Did this person understand what was required of them? And Doug and I came up with a list of some of the things that we feel are very important when setting clear expectations. You want to communicate often and in different ways. Everybody does not process the information the same way. Some people will be happy to read a detailed email. Some people will need audible descriptions. Some people are visual. So it's making sure that you're communicating often in different ways, and then also setting the expectations that it's not just the performance, but also the behaviors that you
Mhm.
want to see modeled by your middle managers. They are setting the precedent of the culture and the norms and the values and the attitudes that employees will model. And think about it. These are the employees that will possibly be the next middle managers. So we want to ensure that we're establishing a really solid foundation for both performance and for behavior standards, and understanding how that is going to create career pathing and success for everybody. Best practices around setting expectations. I'm a fan of SMART goals. I think they're timeless. I think they work. Being very diligent about articulating clear expectations, having regular performance check-ins. If I had the time and opportunity, I think I would do a whole segment on regular performance check-ins. I am an advocate of making sure people are not surprised in their annual evaluations. There should be more than just one conversation a year regarding performance. This should be a regular cadence, be it in weekly, bi-weekly, monthly check-ins to evaluate and acknowledge, recognize and acknowledge the efforts and the works, and then also coaching on things that are not aligned with what the expectations are in real time. That's the way we curtail some of the behavior challenges, is when we call in those actions in real time. Um, I think my favorite, and I feel like I'm rambling, so Doug, I'm gonna give you a second here.
Okay.
Setting
Okay.
clear expectations, accountability and responsibility are things that
Right.
we have to make sure are in place. And accountability, what we've seen, and well, I can only speak for myself, what I've seen with a lot of clients is there is a struggle right now with middle managers holding team members accountable. And the accountability piece is there's this desire to make sure the conversations happen, but there are some middle managers that have not been fully equipped to
Right.
have those conversations. They're not sure of what I can and cannot say or how to deliver
Right.
constructive insight or feedback. So sometimes the missed deliverables and timelines are avoided and not addressed because middle managers don't feel like they have the capacity or the aptitude to relay those messages. And sometimes they feel like they don't have the time to do
Right.
that as well. So I've gone on a bit of a tangent, Doug.
Well, let me add something to accountability. So
Sure.
what happens sometimes with accountability is we don't hold everybody equally accountable, I guess is the way to look at that. And if
Mhm.
you're if you set the expectation and the person is not meeting the expectations, it's important to have that conversation, because the quicker that you can do that, the better that they'll move forward. Now, I want to jump back to one other thing as well, and that's inspect what you expect. And I think this is where a lot of middle managers will struggle. They they set the expectations and then they don't go back and check, right? And so it's really you're not doing those check-ins. And what's happening is that that behavior or a procedure is not being followed, and it goes on for a long time. So it's really about how do we do that in a way that we don't want to be micromanaging. And I'm going to talk about micromanaging in the next slide. And so we don't want to be micromanaging, but we want to make sure people are doing what we've asked them to do. I'll give you another example. When going back to communicating often, I worked with a consultant for many years, and he used to tell me that the best way to communicate is to communicate 10 times 10 different ways. That's a lot, but people may not get it right away. I worked with a client at one time that she didn't understand. She was the head of the organization, and she didn't understand why her middle managers were not doing what she asked them to do. And I said, well, how did you tell them? And she said, well, I sent out an email. And I go, one? And she said, yeah. I said, that's why they're not doing what you're doing, because people miss that. It's a constant communication about what are the expectations. So as senior leaders, it's important that we continue to communicate those expectations to our middle managers, and then give them, and then on top of it, give the skills to the middle managers so they can communicate those effectively to our employees. In different organizations, what I've done in the past is we've really provided even talking points. I mean,
Mhm.
it's really okay, so we're going to introduce this new program. Let's say it's a customer service program. This is why we're doing it. This is what we want you to get out of it. And this is how we would like you to contribute to it. So it's really about giving them specifics. It seems like a lot, but a lot of times your middle managers are looking to you and saying, okay, so we're doing this new thing, and I'm not really sure what I want to do with what to do with it. So it's providing those with the tools. So I worked with the first female president on the Las Vegas Strip, and I worked with her for many years. And she's the one who introduced this to me. So we would have we would meet with all of our senior leaders, and we'd have worksheets that we filled out about everybody's goals and how are they progressing on their goals, and then how did you communicate it to your employees. So it was really structured. I mean, there's obviously there's casual conversations and agility that you can have, but it was really structured to help the next level down understand how we could do that. So yeah, I learned a ton from her. She was fantastic. So she'd be happy that I'm talking about her again. So all right, well, let's talk about competencies.
Okay.
So I want to talk about leadership competencies with you a little bit. So there's 5 that I want to talk about. There's many, but I think these are 5 really important competencies that any leader should have. And the first one is integrity. And so when we talk about integrity, that is doing the right thing even though no one's watching, I guess is how it's always described. But it's really looking at, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I doing what I'm saying I'm going to do? And that's us setting an example as senior leaders. And then we are asking our next level to do that as well. So it's integrity. The second piece is to provide clear direction and objectives without being micromanaging. So, when I talked about on the last screen, we talked a little bit about, okay, so we had the structure. You don't want to overly structure things so you have it to go back to, but you're not going to micromanage your folks. You want them to learn how to make those decisions and how to step into a leadership role. Because I think sometimes the frustration is that some middle managers just wait for the executives to tell them what is it we need to do, when they should really be running their own department, right? So if you think about that, it's how can we empower them to follow the objectives that we've outlined, but then give them the freedom to do some of the things in their department. And I'm going to say, if I say it once, right? If I say it once, right, Ro, I'm going to say it 50 times today. Um, communicate, communicate,
Mhm.
communicate. And then when you're done with that, guess what you do? You communicate again.
Okay, again.
Okay. Because people don't always get it on the first try. And there's different ways. You do it in an email, you do it in meetings, you maybe have a handout, you have it all different kinds of conversations. And then also be flexible. And I know sometimes as leaders that it can be a little, we can change our opinions, right? And so if you think about how can we be flexible in our opinions and help and how we need to do things. And then finally, I think 1 and 5 are the two most critical in being a people leader. The last one is to genuinely care about the success of your employees. And
Mhm.
it's where I really want, I want Ro to be successful. I want other people who work in the organization to be successful. And so it's a really important competency. Now, these are just kind of 5 foundational ones. There's a whole bunch of other ones that we could talk about, but this is really kind of 5 foundational ones. So how do we do that? We can do that with coaching and mentorship.
Mhm.
We can do training programs. Leadership training is great. Leadership coaching is great. They can learn on their own. LinkedIn has lots of opportunities as well as other online training companies. And then I think I've said this many times as well, providing language to talk with employees. This is the standard for how we talk with employees. This is how we introduce new concepts. Oh, yes.
That's
I
the
can repeat the
request
five
for the
competencies.
5 competencies, right?
Okay, got it. Okay. First one is integrity. The second one is to provide clear direction without, oh, and Ro's putting it in without micromanaging. And we should probably send these out afterwards, Ro.
Mhm.
And then clearly communicate what you want, be flexible and able to change your opinion if you need to. And then finally, take a genuine interest in the success of your employees or anybody in the organization, your peers, anyone. Okay.
Excellent.
We can we can probably put these out, don't you think, bro? We can do
Yes,
it.
we
Yeah,
can make
okay,
sure that these
great. Okay,
are sent out after the fact.
cool.
And I think if I could just add one, I totally agree with all the ones you've identified. I think it's very important that there is some type of social intelligence
Oh yeah.
middle managers, actually all leaders should have, but especially middle managers, just to be able to kind of gauge how we are interacting and the ability to be self-aware and self-regulate. Because sometimes the energy that middle managers give off will dictate how their team is going to function and respond. And I really have found when leaders are intentional about making sure that they are proactively communicating and
Mhm.
trying to get in front of situations, it creates an environment where their team feels that they're safe to come. And Leela, you make a very important point. Empathy is definitely a major factor in
Mhm.
leadership, especially at the middle management. As we stated, there are a ton of competencies, and we just wanted to highlight some of them. But because it was brought up in the chat, I will agree with
Yeah.
Leela's state that empathy is a must. And Lauren, you are right on target with that thought. Thoughts on accountability. Look what our next slide is. Actioning accountability. I think you got ahead of us, but it's
Yeah.
very much welcome. So accountability is a big factor and has been a big challenge for a lot of organizations that we engage with. And what we've offered is kind of how to action accountability and asking some questions for engagement with managers and one-on-one conversations with employees to help identify some of the barriers and to collaborate on solution strategies. So, really asking, what does the employee understand their role to be? What do others expect from that role? How prepared is the individual to deliver in the way that the expectations have been set? And what does the organization need from the role? So these accountability measures help people to see how they individually contribute to the success. Sometimes the disconnect comes in because people don't feel like their roles matter. Oh, I hate to hear employees describe their role as, oh, I just do administrative services. No, your administrative services are what aligns all of
Right.
the other departments to be in compliance and making sure all of the data and information is needed to make decisions that are going to further improve the organization's deliverables and offerings to clients. So it's really helping individuals understand how they're contributing to the success, and then also making sure that there is some type of clear understanding around how the role fits into the larger picture of the organization.
And if we don't hold people accountable, we don't get the work done. I mean, if you it really it gets basically down to that. I mean, you're going to have your superstars that jump in and they do things right away, but you sometimes people need a little push or need to understand that there's, that this is what the expectation is. So again, it goes back. I think should I say it again, Roy?
I think you should.
Communication. So 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 this is how and I know when we hold people accountable, they can be more successful and they can move into the next level. And I think that really helps with it as well.
And what I've seen is, because some leaders, middle managers, are not comfortable with holding their teams accountable, they will take on that work, which is
Yeah.
now compiled with them doing their
Right.
jobs, and then they're trying to ensure that whatever deliverables are needed are still executed. So they're creating additional workloads for themselves because they're not feeling empowered to
Mhm.
delegate, to make sure that there's follow through, to hold people accountable, to manage performance and behaviors. And what I've learned is a lot of times in present workforces, middle managers are having challenges managing multiple generations because the styles and the approaches are different. How authority is viewed is different based on generational um, interpretations. There's this need to have to adjust, and that's a big thing about the agility of being in middle management. We have to be able to have the conversations, hold people accountable, acknowledge the positive behaviors, coach the ones that need advisement, and really be at the forefront of what's happening and
Right.
not taking everything on ourselves to fully execute or let deliverables go undone or not meeting objectives of the organization. So it's intense. It's intense in middle management.
And Brian referred back to something that we talked about earlier as well as is the importance of having celebrations and having recognition is when your team makes it and they do everything that they said they're going to do, or a person has great performance. Yeah, it's really important to celebrate. And it's also important to personalize that celebration and really know your employees about
Yeah.
what it is that they want to do. So thanks for that, Brian. Thanks for reminding us about that.
So how do we know when people are ready for middle management? How do we gauge and assess that, Doug?
Well, let's look at our assessment. So, do you want to switch out? Do you want me to take a couple and then you'll take a couple? Shall we
Sure.
do that? All right. So sure. So the first thing, this has happened in a lot of industries. And what happens when we oftentimes promote people to management positions? We take the person who does the job the best. Now, is that always the case to be the best leader in the organization? Not always. Sometimes it is. So we want to look at a few, um, we want to look at a couple of things. So I'm going to start on I have to figure out now, is that the left side or is that my left or your right? Okay, we're going to start with strength. Um, so, so you really want to look at somebody who's operating well at the expected level or they're going towards the next level. Like they're doing things that they probably could do already as a manager. So are they performing at a high level? And then so they're really looking at they want to be that next piece. The other piece is we look at what are the areas of development or the areas of opportunity that this person needs to do to move to that next level and really set their expectations differently that you would set somebody else at that same level. I mean, there are basic expectations of what they need to do the job, but then there's the growth expectations and what opportunities do I want to provide with you to move to that next level. So then I'll pass over to my partner here, Ro.
So when we think about capability, this component of assessing someone's readiness, it's looking at how they're performing, knowing that they have the ability to, but they have yet to be asked to do so. So you've seen and observed behaviors, and even sometimes there's like this inconsistent. You can tell when an employee likes to do a certain task or a certain function because they kind of give it their all, but there are other areas where the performance is not really meeting that expected level. So with capability, there's an opportunity to kind of play to the strengths and also inform the opportunities that may require upskilling, additional support and resources. If you see that someone is misaligned, this means that the incumbent is or can operate at a much higher level than the aligned position. It's really about making sure we get them in the right role. Sometimes we assess and assign people to roles based off of tenure, based off of perceived personalities. And I have found in my professional experience that sometimes people are put into middle management just because they have longevity with an organization and they think that is the assumed next step. I have always encouraged leaders and senior executives to realize not everyone has a track for being management. That's not everybody's wish. Some people don't want to manage people. Some people like to be like the subject matter expertise in a certain function. And sometimes I've seen individuals move into middle management who really didn't desire to be there, but in a way to keep the talent and the knowledge in the organization, it was perceived to be the next best step. So sometimes there's a misalignment at middle management and going back to assess if the role is appropriate, if the skill set is appropriate, and making sure that all of these factors are considered will really help design a rewarding experience for everyone.
Mhm.
It helps navigate the two-way conversation because if I feel that this is really where I want to be, I'm going to perform to my strengths. I'm going to be able to identify the opportunities where there's continuous learning. And if I'm not in the appropriate role, being able to go to a leader and say, hey, let's have a conversation versus kind of sitting quietly and then starting to look for other opportunities outside of the organization. Again, it's about the communication. There's a question, what about alignment with an employee's career goals? Exactly. I always think about it in terms of, is this a person that aspires to go up? And and I say up in the directive of kind of moving up the management levels in an organization, or is this someone that wants to expand their knowledge kind of at the level that they are to be seen as like a subject matter expert or an expertise in a certain function. And I think having clear career pathing so progression can be seen, so people know what competencies, what skill sets, what proficiencies are needed to move from level to level and be clear creates more of objective hiring. So it's not being done based off of personality, preference, or perceived performance issues. Um, I thought I had another question. Doug, anything else you want to add to the readiness or that you've seen in engagements with clients?
Well, it's interesting because in all of the different industries that I worked in, it's very similar. There's the folks who want to they want to stay in their position and they want to learn everything that they can possibly learn about that position. And they become your subject matter experts. And so then there are the folks that want to grow and develop. And so we need to be ready to do that. And so really think about how you can help that person to grow to the next level. And it may not be in the same department.
Mhm.
So I've worked in organizations where we had management development training programs, I guess is the best way to put it. I did a program called Take Flight at one time, and it's where we took high potential people either at supervisory or manager level and worked with them to give them the skills that they needed to move into that next step in their career. So they would want to move to a director position or a VP position or something like that. And we took them through that process and helped them to understand what that meant and what skills they needed to have. And we had a lot of success with that program. So it's really looking at how can you take some of those really high potential folks and help them to move into the next step. But also there's people that you already work with. And there's
Mhm.
people that you've already identified who you can actually help on your own. You don't need a specific program to do that, but it's really finding ways to help them to move to that next level.
So as
There's a
we
good comment here. Did you see Kim's comment? We have an entire class about the good, bad, and ugly of management. So to help communicate and set expectations for who think they aspire to manage others. Oh, very cool. It's a popular class. Yeah, I can imagine that. Absolutely.
I see there's another question here. What should be done if an employer cannot offer upward mobility to the employee if they know they desire it, but the employer may not really know if that can offer, if they can offer it to the individual in the foreseeable future? Should the employer offer be honest with knowing the risks that the employee may leave? I know extra compensation can always be offered to help encourage someone to stay. Here's my take on this question, and my apologies for reading it really slowly. I think open and honest, transparent communication. If there's not an opportunity to move someone up in the organization, and that is the desire, having a conversation around what can be done to help build the skill sets and navigate next steps. Compensation is not always going to be the end all be all or the motivating factor for some individuals. Yes, it meets a need, but are opportunities that people are looking for more. Are there mentorship opportunities? Are there shadowing opportunities? When I used to work at a casino, I was very intrigued by the fact that one of our senior executives wanted to learn a piece of the business that she didn't normally touch and did like a shadow intern. She was over like legal compliance, things like that, but wanted to understand the finance, and there wasn't going to be a role for her in finance as a senior executive, but she did like an internship and shadowing experience. So there's a way to get creative and give opportunity to learn more information, build skills and competencies, as well as helping retain talent in the organization. I personally think having the open conversation about what is feasible and being honest with employees and not setting false hope if it's not in alignment from a fiscal or budgetary standpoint to offer promotion, be honest with that person and let them know. Doug, your thoughts?
I I would agree. I just believe in being transparent that if there's not, if there's other ways that we can give you more skills, and not have a direct career path. I believe in just being transparent about that because then the employee knows. And so, okay. Oh, sorry. I just saw another comment, but I think that's the best way to work with employees. Just be transparent about what we have to offer. So,
And then that way the person is making an informed decision.
mhm,
If there's open and clear communication about, expectations, what the organization is willing to offer. If the person decides to stay, they're invested. If they opt to leave, then we've created an opportunity for someone else to come in and capitalize on that versus someone being in a position where they're going to be dissatisfied, that's going to start to affect employee engagement and morale and productivity, because they really don't want to be there and they're guessing as to what their next step is. So I am a big fan of communicate, communicate, communicate openly, honestly, and transparently.
all
So
right. So we're at the end. Yeah. So I want to
we
just tie back
are.
to something that Kim said though, earlier about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mhm.
So I sometimes it's interesting in my career. I really people sort of glamorize the role of a manager. It's hard work, man. And so and so it's really having to understand not only what we want as an organization, but understand how to work with people and
Mhm.
have the emotional intelligence to be able to work with people and to understand that everybody's a little bit different. You're going to have to talk to them differently. You'll have to recognize them differently. And that it's not, there are some days when you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I want to go home. So it's just to really be ready for that. And I think that's an important thing that we can teach to our managers as well. So
Agreed. Agreed. So some of the key takeaways that we want to leave you all with today is, develop the strategies to help keep individuals engaged and motivated. Very, very important. Really be intentional about making sure those designs are set, and then evaluating the roles to maximize on both impact and satisfaction, because that's the secret to success there. Um, the others are develop clear goals for better performance, managing expectations, being very clear. And now I'll let you do the your favorite.
oh, communicate, communicate, communicate. And then when you're done communicating, you communicate again. So
Communicate
that's
again.
always my favorite. Yeah. So
So as we discussed, and I thoroughly enjoy having these conversations with you all, and especially with you, Doug. It's really important that we understand that middle managers are feeling a lot of pressure.
mhm,
And the best thing that we can do is offer clear guidance, support, um, based off of what they need as well. Sometimes they get lost kind of in the shuffle in the middle of the sandwich, and we want
mhm.
to make sure that they have what they need so that there is a success level that if they aspire to move up in the organization, they have created an environment where their direct reports understand the performance standards and the behavior standards to be successful within our individual organizations. Are there any additional
Yeah. Any
questions?
other questions for us?
Feel free to put them in the chat. I did not see any in the question and answer portal. But please know this webinar will be available. I believe we put the link in. It will also come out for the link to the YouTube in the follow-up communication. If you have additional questions that you want to reach out to us individually, both our email addresses are here on this final slide. We encourage you to connect with us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all of the social media outlets, but we are very happy to follow up with additional conversations and questions. And we hope everyone has an amazing day and has a great weekend. Thank you all so much for
Thank
participating
you.
today.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Take care.